The sun beat down relentlessly over the United States Navy SEALs training grounds in Coronado, California. The concrete combative circle reflected the glaring light, making the air shimmer with heat and tension. 282 SEAL operators formed an intimidating perimeter, standing at attention, their eyes sharp and calculating. Every man and woman present was elite, battle-tested, and disciplined. The air smelled of sweat, salt from the nearby ocean, and the faint metallic tang of anticipation. At the center of it all, Lieutenant Ava Ramirez stepped forward, unassuming yet radiating a quiet authority. She had survived firefights in Afghanistan, led intelligence operations in hostile zones, and endured the relentless pressure of command. She had seen death up close and had stared it down without flinching. Yet nothing in her career had prepared her for the atmosphere in this circle. These men, elite, decorated, and unshakably confident, looked at her as though her very presence was an anomaly, a mistake in their perfect world of tradition and rigor. Two senior instructors, legends in their own right, took their place opposite her. Both men were broad-shouldered, with years of combat experience etched into every line of their faces, yet arrogance shone brighter than their medals. Their eyes scanned her critically, lips twitching into dismissive smirks. Whispers spread through the SEALs. Who does she think she is? She doesn't belong here. Ava noted it all, the calculated derision, the quiet judgment of hundreds of operators. Her lips pressed together in a thin line, her fingers tightening slightly. Lieutenant Ramirez, one of the instructors called, his voice carrying authority and mockery, "This isn't a classroom. You observe, you learn. Don't try to impress anyone here. It won't work." Ava's gaze never wavered. "I'm not here to impress," she said evenly, her voice carrying the weight of calm certainty. "I'm here to observe and to ensure proper technique." The instructor laughed, a low, mocking sound that echoed across the circle. "Proper technique? You think you can teach us? In front of 282 operators who have been through more combat than you've seen in your lifetime." His companion stepped closer, cracking his knuckles, a prelude to the physical intimidation he was preparing to deliver. Ava's heart rate remained steady. She had been trained to recognize threats, both spoken and physical, and she analyzed the angles, the openings, the moment before force could be applied. Without warning, the first instructor lunged, followed instantly by the second. They coordinated, a rehearsed, synchronized strike. Double kicks aimed precisely at her chest slammed into her with brutal force. The impact lifted her off her feet and hurled her backward. Ava hit the concrete hard. Pain shot through her ribs, her breath knocked out, dust clouded around her. A collective gasp rose from the formation. 282 SEALs froze mid-breath, eyes wide in disbelief. For a heartbeat, everything was still. The instructors' smirks widened, satisfied in their display of dominance. They assumed she would crumble, humiliated before an entire unit of America's most elite warriors. But Ava's body stirred. Her fingers twitched as she pushed against the concrete, dust and grit clinging to her uniform. She breathed in shallowly, then deeper, regaining control. Her mind, honed by years of combat and survival training, clicked into focus. This was no ordinary fall. Ava lifted herself onto her elbows, then slowly onto her knees. The smirks faltered as they realized she was not staggering or clutching her chest in pain. Her movements were deliberate, controlled, like a predator assessing the next move. Her eyes locked on the two men who had dared humiliate her. The crowd of SEALs sensed the change immediately. The air thickened, a collective tension like the calm before a storm. Every operator instinctively recognized discipline, control, and lethal capability in her posture. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly, almost conversationally. Her voice was calm, measured, but it carried an unmistakable undercurrent of warning. Her gaze didn't waver, it pinned them in place. The surrounding SEALs exchanged uneasy glances. Some had expected her to break, to retaliate angrily, but the silence, the composure, was far more unnerving than any scream or strike. The commanding officer stepped forward cautiously, raising his hand to signal pause. "Lieutenant Ramirez, do you require medical attention?" She shook her head. No, reset. She removed her jacket and handed it to the nearest petty officer, a quiet signal that she was ready to resume. Her movements were precise, deliberate. Every eye in the formation remained locked on her, and murmurs rippled through the ranks. No one had ever witnessed such a reaction, combining calm assessment with controlled authority in the midst of a public humiliation. The two instructors looked at each other, briefly faltering in their confidence. Their smirks were gone, replaced with the faintest shadow of uncertainty. They had assumed victory with arrogance. They had underestimated the resolve, skill, and composure of the woman standing in front of them. Ava's breath was steady. Her mind was calculating. Every joint, every angle, every possible motion of retaliation had been analyzed in an instant. The SEALs in the circle felt the shift before it happened. Something was about to occur that would be remembered long after this day. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger but with precision focus. Her stance adjusted imperceptibly, weight distributed perfectly, muscles ready. The air seemed to hum with anticipation. This was not just a fight. It was a lesson, one that would leave an impression stronger than any words, louder than any command. Ava Ramirez was rising, and the two men who had thought to dominate her were about to learn a lesson in control, precision, and the consequences of underestimating her. The courtyard remained silent, the heat of the California sun baking the concrete underfoot, yet the tension felt heavier than the temperature. 282 Navy SEALs stood frozen in rigid formation, eyes locked on the center circle. The two senior instructors who had double-kicked Ava Ramirez were now the ones uncertain, their arrogance faltering as they registered the calm determination in her stance. Every muscle in her body was coiled, ready, but not a shred of panic or anger betrayed her thoughts. She was not trembling. She was calculating. Ava slowly brushed dust from her sleeves deliberately, as though she were preparing for a routine drill. The commanding officer stepped closer, concern flashing in his eyes, but he said nothing. He had seen her fall, had witnessed the strike meant to humiliate her, yet he recognized that she was far from broken. This was more than resilience. It was controlled presence under duress, something that few people, even the most elite warriors, could maintain in such a public and shocking moment. The instructors, still smirking with misplaced confidence, whispered to each other. Their arrogance hadn't entirely left. They thought that by standing so close, by projecting bravado, they could still intimidate her. But Ava's gaze swept over them, calm and unblinking, calculating every motion, every angle, every tiny shift in balance. The SEALs around the circle could feel the tension rising. It was electric, almost tangible, a prelude to something inevitable. Ava's mind raced back briefly to her earlier years, to her family home in San Antonio, Texas. Her father, a retired Army officer, had drilled discipline into her from the moment she could walk. Her mother had emphasized mental focus and strategy. Those lessons, combined with years at the United States Naval Academy and advanced combatives training under Marine reconnaissance instructors, had taught her that composure was as lethal as strength. She had been tested in Afghanistan under fire, facing ambushes and chaos where every decision counted for life or death. This, though humiliating, was familiar territory, controlled danger, calculated response. "You should have thought twice," Ava said quietly, almost conversationally, her voice carrying without raising its tone. "I don't respond to disrespect lightly." There was no anger in her words, only an icy precision that seemed to make the instructors hesitate. They glanced at each other, confusion flickering in their eyes. No one had spoken to them like this before, not in the combatives' yard, not in front of hundreds of operators. The commanding officer raised his hand, signaling the instructors to stand down, yet they barely noticed. Their attention was entirely on her. They thought themselves untouchable, decorated, elite, legends among SEALs. But for the first time, they faced a calculated and undeniable threat in a situation they had thought trivial. Ava adjusted her stance subtly, her movements imperceptible yet deliberate. Her feet shifted, grounding her, preparing for every possible reaction from the men before her. As the crowd watched, whispers spread across the formation. Some SEALs exchanged glances, silent acknowledgement passing between them. This wasn't just a woman standing her ground. This was a demonstration of deadly expertise, discipline, and control. Many operators had trained alongside elite soldiers for years, yet the precision in Ava's posture and focus sent an unspoken message. She was not to be underestimated. Her eyes flicked to the first instructor, then the second, analyzing every detail of their stance, their weight distribution, their minor tells. The SEALs could see the difference immediately. The men were reacting instinctively, relying on ego and muscle memory. Ava was calculating, predicting, controlling. She had transformed from victim to strategist in mere moments, and the effect on the audience was profound. The instructors smirked again, a last attempt to display confidence, but it was faltering. One of them tried to speak, voice trembling slightly, masking surprise. "You think you can?" Ava interrupted, her voice calm but commanding, each word measured, deliberate. "Reset, proper engagement, no more surprises." She removed her jacket completely, folding it neatly and handing it to the petty officer nearby, a silent statement of readiness. It was a gesture that communicated far more than words. She was prepared, disciplined, and in control. The gesture drew a murmur from the SEALs, admiration hidden beneath their professional masks. The commanding officer finally nodded, acknowledging her composure and signaling the instructors to comply. There was no turning back. The circle widened slightly as Ava prepared for what would happen next. The air crackled with anticipation. Every SEAL operator felt the shift in the dynamic. What had begun as a public humiliation was now a stage for discipline, skill, and authority. Ava's mind focused entirely on the men before her. She recalled lessons learned in harsh combat scenarios, each one emphasizing efficiency, precision, and the ability to incapacitate without chaos. She calculated timing, distance, angles, and leverage with military-grade precision. One misstep could escalate the confrontation dangerously, yet hesitation was unacceptable. Her hands twitched, ready yet relaxed. Her breathing remained steady, unhurried. She was not afraid. She was exact. Across the circle, the two instructors glanced at each other, uncertainty creeping in. They had believed arrogance and reputation alone were enough to intimidate her. They had been wrong. Ava had shown restraint, presence, and lethal potential all at once. The SEALs around them sensed it, their eyes widening, their posture instinctively sharpening. The atmosphere was electric. The balance of power had shifted. The moment stretched, silence heavy, charged with anticipation. Then Ava inhaled slowly, letting her body align perfectly. The instructors braced themselves, thinking she might hesitate, that their previous strike had succeeded. But Ava was ready, calm, focused. She would demonstrate skill, control, and consequence with precision. The stage was set. The SEALs held their collective breath, sensing history about to unfold in the center of the yard. Ava's eyes narrowed subtly, lips pressing into a thin line. The calm eye of a storm. The next strike would not be impulsive. It would be calculated, efficient, and inescapable. And in that moment, every operator in the circle understood something profound. The woman before them was not merely standing. She was preparing to command, to correct, and to demonstrate that control and skill outweighed arrogance and brute force. The courtyard seemed to hold its breath. 282 Navy SEALs formed a rigid, unbroken circle, their eyes glued to the center. Every face reflected a mixture of disbelief, anticipation, and silent respect. Lieutenant Ava Ramirez stood poised, her uniform lightly dusted with concrete from the fall moments ago. Her breathing was steady, measured. Not a twitch betrayed the adrenaline pumping through her veins. The two instructors, once smug and arrogant, now fidgeted slightly, uncertainty creeping into their stance. The first man shifted, foot tapping, preparing for another charge. His ego demanded dominance, a public redemption for the humiliation he had just endured. His muscles coiled, his knuckles flexing instinctively, his eyes locked on her chest. He lunged forward, a predatory rush fueled by pride and disbelief. The SEALs tensed, anticipating impact, but Ava moved with the precision of a trained predator. Her weight shifted subtly, barely perceptible, yet perfectly timed. She sidestepped in a single fluid motion, her right foot pivoting against the concrete. Her hands intercepted his wrist, fingers gripping like steel. In one precise twist, she leveraged his momentum, forcing his center of gravity off balance. His knee collapsed under the unnatural angle, a sharp crack resonating through the yard. The instructor's arms flailed instinctively, but he could not regain control. Gravity dictated his descent, and he slammed to the concrete with a heavy thud. Dust rose around him, but he didn't scream. Shock froze him in place, the surprise of being so easily subdued rendering him immobile. The crowd of SEALs exhaled silently. Whispers darted across the formation. She's faster than he thought. Her precision lethal, controlled. None had expected her to strike so quickly, yet she hadn't raised her voice, hadn't lost control. Her actions were calculated, measured, entirely tactical. The second instructor, witnessing his colleague's collapse, let out a low growl, fury and panic mingling. He surged forward without thought, driven by instinct and wounded pride. Ava's eyes flicked toward him, evaluating. She noted the slight misalignment of his shoulders, the predictable arc of his swing. She adjusted her stance, weight perfectly balanced, feet positioned for both attack and evasion. As he closed the distance, she intercepted the strike with her forearm, absorbing the blow with practiced precision. Pain registered briefly, but she ignored it. Her body was trained to convert impact into leverage. She pivoted, using his forward momentum against him. Her palm struck his chest, snapping him back, disorienting him instantly. He staggered, a moment of panic flashing across his face. She didn't pause. With a fluid motion, she rotated his extended arm behind his back, controlling it like a lever. The shoulder popped audibly as it reached its limit. His feet scrambled to maintain balance, but she shifted her weight and delivered a low, sweeping kick. His ankle buckled. His center of gravity failed. He crashed onto the concrete beside his colleague. Both men lay incapacitated, restrained by a combination of pain, disorientation, and precise targeting of joints. Silence overtook the courtyard. Even the ocean breeze seemed to pause, carrying the faint smell of sweat, dust, and the tang of adrenaline. The SEALs, elite warriors who had faced live fire and ambushes, stood frozen, absorbing the spectacle. None had ever seen authority, skill, and control so perfectly intertwined. This was not brute force. This was art, a lethal, disciplined choreography designed to incapacitate without chaos. Ava remained perfectly upright, breathing steady, muscles relaxed but coiled. Her eyes scanned the circle, registering every reaction. The two instructors groaned in pain, awareness dawning that their arrogance had underestimated her ability. Their smirks had been replaced with shock, fear, and a grudging respect. The medic stationed nearby stepped cautiously forward, unsure whether to intervene. Ava shook her head slightly, signaling that they were to hold position unless necessary. Her gaze swept across the 282 SEALs. Some faces reflected awe, others confusion. Many masked their astonishment with professional stoicism. She had shifted the dynamic in seconds. In the center of the circle, she was no longer the observer. She had become the authority, the controlled force that demanded attention and respect. The lesson was clear. Arrogance could be dismantled by discipline, precision, and calm under pressure. The second instructor tried to rise, trembling, his breathing shallow. His pride had been shattered, his body betrayed by the precise targeting of his limbs. Ava stepped toward him with careful control, maintaining safe distance while her presence radiated authority. One measured movement, one calculated step, was enough to remind him that any impulsive action would be met with predictable, controlled consequences. She did not smile. She did not gloat. Every SEAL in the formation understood. She was not cruel, but she was decisive. A subtle ripple of acknowledgement passed through the circle. Operators whispered to each other quietly, admiring the flawless execution. Some exchanged glances, impressed by her timing, her poise, and the effortless way she turned humiliation into tactical dominance. The instructors themselves were learning a lesson they would not soon forget. This was no simple sparring exercise. This was an inescapable demonstration of controlled combat, a live display of skill tempered by experience and intelligence. Ava inhaled deeply, resetting her stance for any potential continuation, though she did not intend to escalate further. Her actions had communicated a powerful message. Control, composure, and calculated authority would always prevail over arrogance and recklessness. She had not only defended herself, she had transformed the yard into a lesson in discipline that 282 SEALs would remember for the rest of their careers. The commanding officer finally stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Lieutenant Ramirez," he said, "you've demonstrated both restraint and effectiveness. Stand down." Ava nodded subtly, easing tension without breaking her poise. The SEALs relaxed marginally, yet the energy in the air remained charged. Respect had been earned not through intimidation, but through precise, controlled action that left no room for argument. Ava's eyes flicked to the fallen instructors once more. Their arrogance had cost them more than pride. They had underestimated a warrior whose experience, discipline, and lethal skill could not be ignored. In this courtyard, under the scorching California sun, she had transformed humiliation into authority, and the SEALs had silently acknowledged her mastery. The moment was complete. Silence, heavy and reverent, fell over the yard. The first strike had been decisive, and the message was clear. Ava Ramirez was not to be underestimated, and the next movements would only reinforce the lesson. The courtyard seemed suspended in a moment outside of time. The sun reflected harshly off the concrete, but no one noticed the heat anymore. 282 Navy SEALs stood in perfect formation, silent, their eyes locked on Lieutenant Ava Ramirez at the center. Both senior instructors were sprawled on the ground, groaning in pain and disbelief. The first had a hyperextended leg, the second's shoulder and ankle were compromised, yet neither dared to move recklessly. They had underestimated her once. They would not make that mistake again. Ava's gaze flicked from one man to the other, assessing every muscle, every micro-movement. Her mind raced faster than any opponent could anticipate. Every SEAL in the circle could see it. She was poised, calm, and lethal in a way that transcended brute force. This was battlefield control, refined through years of combat intelligence, joint operations, and real-life survival scenarios. She did not attack recklessly. She attacked deliberately, exploiting balance, leverage, and weakness with surgical precision. The second instructor attempted to rise, fists trembling, face flushed with fury. He swung blindly toward her, a last-ditch effort to reclaim dominance. Ava did not flinch. Her forearm intercepted his punch, absorbing the impact, and she pivoted gracefully. Every movement flowed seamlessly into the next. Her palm struck his chest with calculated force, staggering him backward. He faltered, off balance, disoriented. The SEALs around the perimeter leaned slightly forward, captivated by the display of skill and control. Ava grabbed his extended arm, twisting it with precise pressure. The shoulder popped audibly, a sound that echoed across the courtyard. He yelped, instinctively trying to pull free, but she maintained her grip. His ankle was next. A subtle shift of her weight, a precise angle applied, and the joint gave under controlled pressure. The second man crumpled beside the first, incapacitated. Both instructors now lay on the concrete, not out of fear alone, but because Ava had turned their momentum, muscle, and arrogance against them. Medics rushed forward, but Ava raised a hand to halt them. She wasn't finished demonstrating the lesson. Every SEAL operator in the formation understood. What they were witnessing was not chaos. It was exacting, disciplined control. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't cruelty. This was tactical authority made visible. The operators, elite as they were, had never seen someone dismantle trained instructors with such calm, precision, and efficiency. Ava's breathing remained steady. Her movements were economical, deliberate, yet every action radiated lethal competence. She shifted her gaze across the yard, scanning the 282 SEALs for reaction. Some masked awe behind professional stoicism. Others exchanged glances of disbelief. A ripple of whispered commentary moved through the ranks. Precision, unbelievable control, that's discipline. The first instructor groaned, attempting a weak protest, but his leg would not support him. The second struggled to sit up, only to find his shoulder and ankle rendered useless by targeted pressure. Ava moved closer to the second man, not threatening but demonstrating control over every action. One wrong movement and the consequences would repeat. She did not smile, she did not taunt. The lesson was clear. Discipline and skill could control arrogance and strength alike. Ava's eyes swept the circle once more. The SEALs were silent, captivated, and tense. They understood instinctively that this was not a performance for their entertainment. This was a display of battlefield precision under pressure, a masterclass in tactical restraint. The air was charged with the energy of recognition. A warrior of exceptional skill had arrived, and her presence alone demanded attention and respect. The instructors attempted feeble movements, testing the limits of their incapacitated limbs. Ava remained poised, each subtle shift of her weight ready to counter. She was in total control. Every SEAL operator recognized that any aggressive response would be met with the same controlled, precise incapacitation. Her mastery of leverage, timing, and human biomechanics left no room for error. They were witnessing an entirely new standard of combat efficiency. Whispers turned to quiet admiration. Some SEALs exchanged looks, understanding what many in elite operations rarely acknowledge openly. Skill and composure, not brute force, dominate the battlefield. Ava had transformed what began as public humiliation into an unmistakable demonstration of authority. The men who thought they could intimidate her had underestimated the lethal precision of someone trained to anticipate every threat and counter it with exacting discipline. The commanding officer, finally stepping forward, nodded subtly. "Lieutenant Ramirez," he said, voice calm but commanding, "stand down." Ava relaxed her stance slightly but maintained poise. Every eye remained on her, still holding her in reverence. The lesson had been delivered. The message was clear. Arrogance and impulsive aggression had consequences, even for decorated instructors. Ava's gaze lingered briefly on the incapacitated men. Their pride shattered, their authority stripped. She had not sought vengeance, only discipline, control, and precision. Her body relaxed fractionally, though her mind remained sharp. The SEALs absorbed every detail, the perfect execution, the calm presence, the decisive restraint. This moment, they knew, would be remembered long after today. The sun continued to bake the concrete, casting long shadows across the yard. The two instructors were removed by medics, grumbling and defeated, while Ava remained standing, composed and silent. The SEALs around the circle exchanged subtle nods, acknowledgement passing without words. Respect had been earned, not demanded. Skill, control, and focus had transformed humiliation into authority, and the ripple of that transformation spread quietly but powerfully across the ranks. Ava exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain, though the air remained electric. She had made her point. Control dominates chaos. Discipline overpowers arrogance. And in that moment, the 282 Navy SEALs realized they were witnessing more than a physical confrontation. They were observing the embodiment of composure, precision, and battlefield mastery. The courtyard fell into near silence. Even the ocean breeze seemed to pause, carrying with it the weight of the lesson delivered. Ava Ramirez had demonstrated that one disciplined warrior, calm under pressure, could control the strongest and most arrogant of opponents. The first strike had been complete, the demonstration unforgettable, and the SEALs, silent witnesses, now understood that respect had been claimed, irrevocably and without question. The dust still lingered in the air, stirred by the chaos of the previous moments. The courtyard, once alive with anticipation, had fallen into a heavy, stunned silence. 282 Navy SEALs stood rigid, their eyes wide, still processing what had just occurred. The two senior instructors remained on stretchers, tended by medics who moved cautiously, unsure whether they were dealing with injury or humiliation's aftermath. Every operator present had witnessed something remarkable. Lieutenant Ava Ramirez had dismantled two elite warriors with controlled precision, leaving them incapacitated without a hint of unnecessary aggression. Whispers spread quickly through the formation. "Did you see that?" one operator murmured, voice low, nearly lost in the tension. Another nodded, jaw tight, eyes still fixed on Ava. Precision, timing. She didn't even raise her voice. Even the most hardened SEALs found themselves impressed by the execution. The realization hit them simultaneously. The arrogance that had allowed the instructors to act with impunity had been shattered in moments. Humiliation had turned into authority with terrifying efficiency. The commanding officer finally stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Lieutenant Ramirez," he said, his tone carrying both authority and curiosity, "explain what just happened." Ava exhaled slowly, keeping her posture unbroken. She raised her gaze to the officers, her voice measured, deliberate. "They initiated an unauthorized double strike. My response was controlled, proportionate, and precise. No more, no less. I did not escalate beyond necessity." Her words were calm, almost understated, yet carried undeniable weight. Every operator in the yard registered the authority behind them. Some SEALs shifted subtly, trading glances. Years of training had prepared them for combat and mission execution, but very few had witnessed such a masterclass in controlled response. The instructors were legends, and yet they had fallen. The lesson was clear. Skill, composure, and discipline eclipsed brute force and ego. Many operators suppressed small gasps of astonishment, masking it with stoicism, but the impact of the moment was undeniable. The two incapacitated instructors groaned, and a few SEALs found themselves torn. Their pride and allegiance to the men clashed with the undeniable reality of Ava's skill. One whispered, almost under his breath, "I've trained with them for years, and she just took them apart." Another shook his head slowly, lips pressing into a thin line, understanding that this moment would become part of their collective memory for years. Outside the circle, medics and petty officers worked quietly, preparing to move the injured men from the courtyard. Ava did not interfere. Her gaze scanned the formation, taking in every expression, every microreaction. She understood that this incident had far-reaching implications. It was not just about the incapacitated instructors, it was about the culture they represented. Arrogance, unchecked aggression, and the belief in invincibility had no place in a unit, meant to operate with discipline and precision under life-and-death conditions. By late afternoon, word of the incident had begun to circulate beyond the courtyard. Rumors whispered through the ranks of other units. A woman, a lieutenant, had incapacitated two elite instructors with flawless control in front of hundreds of SEALs. Some found it hard to believe. Others, who had trained alongside her in joint operations, nodded quietly. Ava Ramirez had earned respect the hard way, through action, composure, and a display of mastery few could rival. Back in the courtyard, the commanding officer addressed the formation. His voice was steady, authoritative. "Today, you've all witnessed something remarkable. Lieutenant Ramirez has demonstrated discipline, composure, and tactical control. Let this serve as a reminder. Arrogance has consequences, and skill is earned, not assumed." His words were met with nods and murmurs of acknowledgement. The SEALs' respect for Ava shifted subtly, from wary curiosity to professional admiration. Some operators still struggled internally. How could two men so revered have been so thoroughly undone in moments? Others began to analyze the techniques Ava had used, noting the precision, the restraint, the calculated targeting of joints and leverage. It wasn't brute force. It was strategy, application, and perfect timing. The lesson was clear. True combat mastery required more than strength or experience. It demanded intelligence, control, and composure. The instructors carried off the courtyard were quiet, subdued. Their pride had been shattered, but the lesson lingered. Ava did not gloat. She never had. Her goal had never been humiliation. It had been discipline, control, and demonstration. The SEALs recognized that immediately. The contrast between her calm authority and their reckless aggression was stark. Operators exchanged subtle glances, silently acknowledging that leadership, skill, and respect could manifest in forms far more powerful than fear or physical intimidation. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the courtyard seemed to hold a new energy. The 282 SEALs stood taller, their posture subtly altered, their minds absorbing more than just the combat techniques. They had witnessed composure under provocation, skill over arrogance, authority without ego. Even the youngest, newest operators in the formation understood the gravity of the lesson. In the days following, Ava would face scrutiny. Military investigators would review footage. The instructors would attempt to defend themselves, citing tradition, experience, and status. Yet no analysis could diminish the clarity of what had happened. Arrogance met precision, and precision prevailed. Respect had been earned, not demanded. Across the ranks, murmurs of admiration and astonishment persisted. Ava remained calm throughout, observing silently. Her role as a lieutenant had evolved in minutes. She had not only defended herself but had shifted the perception of authority, skill, and leadership in front of an elite audience. The 282 SEALs would carry the lesson forward. The memory of her control and composure burned into their minds. By the time the courtyard emptied, the sun had begun to set, painting long shadows across the concrete. The two instructors had been removed, the formation had disbanded, yet the impact of the events lingered. This day would be remembered, not as humiliation, not as conflict, but as a demonstration of mastery, precision, and the quiet authority of a warrior who had earned respect in a single, unforgettable moment. The ripple effect was only beginning. Across the SEAL community, across the ranks, and within the culture of elite operators, Ava Ramirez had planted a seed. Discipline and skill triumph over ego and aggression, and the shockwaves would continue to reverberate long after the courtyard fell silent. By the evening, the courtyard had emptied, but the echoes of the confrontation lingered. Inside the command center, monitors displayed footage of the incident on loop. Every angle, every motion, every detail was reviewed meticulously. Lieutenant Ava Ramirez sat calmly in the observation room, legs crossed, hands folded, her face betraying none of the adrenaline still pulsing through her body. Outside, the two incapacitated instructors were being evaluated by medical and legal personnel. Their pride, as much as their bodies, had been crushed. Military investigators arrived swiftly. Their expressions were professional, but curiosity and tension were obvious. They were seasoned, used to incidents involving accidents or procedural mistakes, but never a deliberate public dismantling of elite instructors by a subordinate officer. Ava stood as each investigator approached. Her posture was impeccable, her composure unshaken. She recounted the incident step by step, calmly detailing what had happened, why she had acted, and how her actions had remained within tactical necessity and proportional response. Questions were precise, probing. "Lieutenant Ramirez," one officer asked, "did you consider that your actions might be deemed excessive?" Ava's response was deliberate. "No, every strike, every joint manipulation, every movement was calculated to incapacitate without unnecessary harm. My actions were proportionate to the threat, controlled and tactical. Nothing exceeded what was required to neutralize immediate danger." Her clarity and calm unsettled the investigators. They were trained to analyze and dissect, but Ava's precision in description and reasoning left no gaps, no ambiguity. She cited biomechanics, leverage, angles, and control principles, illustrating each movement in detail. This was not just a defense, it was a demonstration of expertise that few in the room could dispute. The two instructors were interviewed separately. Their recollections were colored by shock, humiliation, and lingering pain. They recounted their intended strikes, their surprise at Ava's response, and their confusion over how someone could dismantle them so efficiently, so calmly. Their words were tempered with grudging respect, yet their pride made admission difficult. "She moved like she knew exactly what would happen," one whispered reluctantly. "I've trained for years, but I never saw anything like that." Within the command center, discussions shifted to policy, precedent, and reputation. The SEAL community was tight-knit, protective of its own. How could this incident be recorded, reported, and acknowledged without creating friction, resentment, or precedent that might challenge traditional hierarchies? Yet no one could dispute the truth. Ava Ramirez had defended herself with precision, discipline, and control that exceeded anything procedural manuals could teach. Hours passed. Ava reviewed the footage herself, noting angles, timing, and execution. She made no alterations, no exaggerations. She was documenting the event with professional rigor. This was not about ego or reputation. This was accountability, transparency, and proof that her actions had been measured. Each frame underscored the lesson she had imparted. Arrogance, unchecked aggression, and disrespect were met with decisive, proportionate control. Word of the incident began to ripple beyond the immediate unit. Commanding officers in related units requested reviews, operators discussed tactics in whispers, and social dynamics subtly shifted. Ava's actions had revealed a vulnerability in cultural norms. Even elite operators could falter under precise, controlled skill. Respect, she demonstrated, was earned in the moment, not assumed because of rank or reputation. By nightfall, Ava was summoned to a high-level briefing with senior leadership. The room was tense. The decision-makers had reviewed the footage multiple times. Some viewed her actions as a potential liability, others as a demonstration of extreme competence and judgment under pressure. "Lieutenant Ramirez," one senior officer began, "your actions were extraordinary. Some question whether it was excessive, others recognize the precision and restraint you demonstrated. How do you justify your response?" Ava's voice remained calm, unwavering. "The threat was immediate and deliberate. Every action I took was measured to neutralize that threat without unnecessary escalation. I maintained control at all times, ensuring no harm beyond what was required. My goal was never retaliation but discipline, and to demonstrate the principle that authority and skill are earned through control, not ego." The room fell silent. Ava's reasoning was meticulous, almost surgical. Senior officers, many of whom had faced combat, recognized the validity of her arguments. They could see the footage, hear the analysis, and understand the logic. She had acted decisively, not impulsively. The lesson extended beyond the courtyard. It applied to culture, discipline, and training in elite operations. Over the following days, investigators compiled their reports. Recommendations were debated. Some suggested reprimands. Others proposed recognition for her skill and composure under provocation. It became clear that her actions had uncovered a flaw in protocol. Arrogance, unchecked by accountability, could undermine operational cohesion. Ava had not only defended herself, she had revealed a critical insight into leadership, control, and the consequences of ego in elite units. Meanwhile, the two incapacitated instructors recovered physically, but their pride remained fractured. They understood, intellectually and viscerally, that they had underestimated Ava Ramirez. Their whispers of grudging respect spread among operators. She moved like the battlefield was mapped in her mind. Every joint, every lever, flawless control. Their reputations endured, but the lesson would never leave them. By the end of the week, the SEAL community buzzed quietly. Operators spoke of precision, composure, and control. Ava's name began circulating, not for ego or notoriety, but for skill, discipline, and the quiet authority she had demonstrated in front of 282 elite warriors. She had not sought recognition. It found her nonetheless. Ava herself remained focused on the bigger picture. She had defended herself, yes, but she had also uncovered a systemic weakness in training culture. Arrogance and ego could not be tolerated if operational effectiveness was to remain uncompromised. Her calm assessment, precision response, and tactical expertise had created a blueprint for how to teach discipline, control, and restraint, lessons that would resonate for years to come. As she stared out at the Pacific horizon that evening, the courtyard empty beneath the fading sunlight, Ava knew this was only the beginning. The physical confrontation had ended, but the impact of her actions, the shift in authority, respect, and culture, was just beginning to ripple outward. The reckoning had begun, and the Navy SEALs would never forget who had set it in motion. Weeks had passed since the courtyard incident, but the reverberations were still being felt. In offices high above the San Diego waterfront, senior Navy leadership convened in a secure conference room. Screens displayed footage of Lieutenant Ava Ramirez's confrontation, captured from multiple angles. Every move she had made was under scrutiny, analyzed frame by tactical experts, legal advisors, and seasoned combat veterans. The room was tense. Some saw her actions as insubordination, others as a display of brilliance. But no one could deny the precision, discipline, and composure she had exhibited in front of 282 Navy SEALs. Rear Admiral Jonathan Keller, a veteran of countless operations, leaned forward, fingers steepled. Her technique is flawless, her response was proportionate, and yet she humiliated two senior instructors in front of the entire unit. That has implications for morale and protocol. He glanced at his staff, seeking reactions. We have to decide how to handle this. Recognition, reprimand, or something else. The room hummed with quiet debate. Some argued that rewarding her could set a dangerous precedent, potentially undermining authority structures. Others countered that her actions demonstrated a crucial principle. Elite operators must respect skill and discipline above ego. Every frame of the video reinforced that argument. Ava's movements were not violent beyond necessity. They were calculated, precise, and instructive. Admiral Keller's age shifted uncomfortably. Sir, her handling of the situation illustrates a gap in training. These instructors were relying on intimidation and brute force. She neutralized that while maintaining total control. That kind of tactical judgment is rare and valuable. The Admiral nodded slowly. Agreed, but we need to balance precedent and respect for hierarchy with recognition of talent. If we mishandle this, we risk sending the wrong message to the community. Meanwhile, in a briefing room adjacent to the conference, Ava Ramirez stood quietly, aware that her fate was being debated. She did not shift nervously, nor did she speak prematurely. She had always known that elite units valued results over ego, and that discipline and composure often mattered more than obedience to unearned authority. Her record spoke for itself, and she had maintained meticulous documentation of every motion, every defensive calculation, every proportionate response she had made. After long deliberation, the Admiral spoke. Lieutenant Ramirez, your actions have not only protected yourself, they've revealed a critical flaw in how we evaluate authority, skill, and discipline within elite units. We've decided to offer you a role designing advanced combatives and operational discipline programs. You will lead training for units where arrogance, ego, or unchecked aggression could compromise effectiveness. Ava processed this silently. She had never sought recognition, promotions, or notoriety. Her focus had always been operational effectiveness and mission success. Yet she recognized the opportunity to influence culture and training across elite units. It was a chance to ensure that future operators learned discipline, composure, and respect for skill, rather than relying solely on brute force or rank. The Admiral continued, you will work with special operations trainers to develop programs emphasizing tactical control, precision, and restraint. Your methods will be incorporated into elite units' combatives, teaching that true mastery lies in measured, controlled action rather than ego-driven aggression. Ava nodded subtly. Understood, sir. I accept the assignment. Her tone was calm, professional, but firm, reflective of the confidence and composure she had demonstrated in the courtyard weeks earlier. The decision was unanimous. Leadership recognized her skill and authority, not only for her immediate performance, but for the potential to reshape culture and operational standards across the SEAL community. Word of the decision spread quickly. Operators who had witnessed the incident were surprised, some quietly thrilled. Whispers of admiration and respect followed her in corridors, in gyms, and on training grounds. The same SEALs who had been shocked by her composure now recognized her as a leader capable of shaping doctrine and culture. Some of the older instructors were reluctant to admit it, but even they could not deny her expertise, her judgment, and the long-term value she would bring to elite training programs. Back on the training grounds, Ava faced her 282 SEALs again, this time not as a subordinate or observer, but as an authority shaping the future of elite combatives. Her first session was deliberate, focused, and rigorous. She emphasized discipline, control, and precision over brute strength. The operators absorbed every lesson, their respect deepening with each demonstration. They learned to anticipate threats, to maintain composure under provocation, and to understand that true authority is earned through skill and strategy, not ego or aggression. Some of the older SEALs who had once doubted her presence now observed quietly, nodding in silent acknowledgement. Even those who had previously questioned her capabilities could not deny the clarity, calmness, and skill she brought to the role. The courtyard incident, once a moment of tension and conflict, had evolved into a turning point, a lesson in leadership, authority, and tactical mastery. By the end of her first week in the new role, Ava had already begun to influence the culture. Operators trained with heightened awareness of control, precision, and the consequences of impulsive aggression. The ripple effect was subtle but undeniable. Her methods encouraged focus over ego, skill over arrogance, and respect over intimidation. Ava herself remained measured. She did not revel in her newfound authority. She understood the responsibility she carried: to teach, to demonstrate, and to ensure that elite operators carried discipline and composure into every mission. The recognition she had received was secondary. Her true purpose was impact, the shaping of warriors capable of combining lethal skill with precise control. And so, as the sun set over the Coronado training grounds, Ava Ramirez stood quietly, surveying the formation of 282 Navy SEALs. What had begun as a confrontation driven by arrogance had become a demonstration of authority, skill, and strategic foresight. Leadership had acknowledged her expertise, operators had gained respect, and the culture of elite combat training had begun to shift in subtle, profound ways. The decision had been made, and its consequences would reverberate for years. Discipline, composure, and mastery had earned recognition, and those who underestimated them had learned, irrevocably, that true authority cannot be assumed. Months had passed since the courtyard incident, but the lessons of that day resonated deeply across the Navy SEAL community. Lieutenant Ava Ramirez now commanded a unique authority, not through rank alone, but through earned respect. Her role in designing advanced combatives and operational discipline programs had transformed the way elite operators approached training. What began as a personal defense against arrogance had grown into a blueprint for leadership, precision, and composure under pressure. The training grounds at Coronado were alive with controlled intensity. 282 SEALs moved through drills, their focus sharpened not by fear or ego, but by deliberate instruction and precise technique. Ava watched silently from the sidelines, her posture calm, her eyes scanning every motion. Operators executed joint locks, leverage maneuvers, and evasive maneuvers with controlled force, her voice echoing when correction or guidance was necessary. Every adjustment reinforced discipline, efficiency, and mastery over chaos. Operators whispered among themselves about the day in the courtyard. She moved like the battlefield was mapped in her mind, one said quietly to his teammate. Every strike precise, every movement calculated. I've never seen anything like it. The memory of her composure and skill under direct provocation became a point of quiet admiration and inspiration. It reminded everyone that authority was not something assumed. It was something demonstrated repeatedly, with precision and discipline. The two instructors who had once underestimated her now attended the training sessions, silently observing. Pride had been humbled, but respect had taken root. They watched as Ava led demonstrations, highlighting subtle angles, weight distribution, and joint control that few had understood before. Their whispers of grudging admiration blended with recognition of the profound skill she exhibited, skill that went far beyond mere physical prowess. It was strategic mastery, executed with calm authority. Word of her program spread quickly through the wider Navy Special Operations community. Commanding officers requested guidance, units sought her insight, and her methodology became a model for integrating discipline and precision into high-stakes training. Ava's influence was subtle but transformative. Operators learned that arrogance and impulsive aggression could be neutralized not with brute force, but with skill, strategy, and calm control. Respect was earned, and once earned, it became the foundation of operational effectiveness. One day, during a live demonstration, Ava paused mid-movement. The 282 SEALs froze instinctively, aware of the gravity in her eyes. "Discipline," she said softly, yet her voice carried across the yard. "Precision is your shield, composure is your weapon. Respect is earned through mastery, not assumption. Control yourself before you try to control others." The operators nodded subtly, internalizing her words. They had witnessed it before in action, and now they understood it as philosophy, a core principle to guide both training and combat. Her influence extended beyond the physical techniques. She instilled an ethos of accountability, humility, and calculated decision-making. New recruits entering the program quickly learned that skill and respect were inseparable. Ego was a liability. Discipline was non-negotiable. The legacy of the courtyard incident became a living example. Actions had consequences, composure commanded attention, and mastery earned authority. Even senior officers, initially skeptical of her approach, came to acknowledge the long-term value. They observed how her programs improved decision-making under pressure, reduced reckless behavior, and fostered cohesion among operators. Ava had transformed what could have been a moment of embarrassment into a turning point for elite operational culture. The SEALs who once doubted her now followed her lead, not out of fear or obligation, but out of admiration and trust in her expertise. Months later, the courtyard stood quiet once more, the sun casting long shadows across the concrete. Ava walked among the operators, observing their drills. A young SEAL approached, hesitating slightly, then said, "Lieutenant Ramirez, thank you. What you taught us, it's more than combatives. It's about control, focus, and knowing your limits." Ava nodded subtly. "Remember, respect is earned every day, in training, in the field, and in life. You don't get it because of rank, you get it because of mastery." Her eyes drifted toward the spot where the two instructors had fallen months earlier. She did not feel triumph or gloating. Instead, she felt the quiet satisfaction of having transformed a moment of confrontation into a lasting lesson. The operators around her, elite as they were, carried the memory not as fear, but as understanding. Mastery and composure had enduring power. The SEALs, whispered acknowledgement of her skill, had turned into institutional recognition. Her methodology was incorporated into standard training protocols. Operators reported improved reaction times, better composure under stress, and enhanced decision-making in simulated combat scenarios. Her influence had created a subtle cultural shift. Arrogance no longer shielded anyone from accountability, and skill, discipline, and composure became the true measure of authority. As Ava stood overlooking the formation of 282 operators, she reflected on the journey. The courtyard incident had begun as a confrontation, a test of her skill against arrogance and ego. It had evolved into a demonstration of mastery, discipline, and authority. Leadership had recognized her value, operators had embraced her methods, and the culture of elite combat training had begun to shift in profound ways. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a golden glow over the training grounds. Ava Ramirez remained at the center, quiet, composed, and resolute. She had earned respect not through intimidation, nor through rank alone, but through mastery, precision, and unwavering control. The legacy of her actions, both the confrontation and the lessons derived from it, would endure long after her presence on the training grounds, shaping generations of Navy SEALs who understood that true authority comes not from ego, but from skill, discipline, and composure. The courtyard was silent, yet alive with lessons learned. Respect had been earned, authority established, and a culture forever transformed by a single, decisive act of skill and composure. Ava Ramirez had not only defended herself, but she had reshaped the meaning of leadership and mastery for everyone who had witnessed her in action.